Good afternoon. I think we can now start the program. So again, I welcome everybody to the book launch of Plying the Straits, Batel Mobilities in Central Philippines. This book project was a major project spearheaded by Dr. Joefe Santarita together with the Asian Institute of Maritime Studies, Maritime, and its research division. So today, this book launch is held in conjunction to the very special event 18th of May 2021, today, we are celebrating the International Museum Day, uh, which is an international event or an international program which seeks to give importance to the role of museums in today's world. The official motto for today's museum is the future of museums, recover and recreate. So right now, because of the pandemic, the actions that most museums can do is very limited. And simply because we cannot do the face-to-face encounter. But through technology, we can still pursue other projects and do major initiatives in order to maintain uh, our heritage programs and heritage advocacies. And one example of this is this Maritime Heritage Book Project that aims have coordinated and done together with the very substantial support of Dr. Joefe Santarita. So right now, I would like to introduce our Dr. Joefe Santarita before I officially transition to the program proper. So Dr. Joefe Santarita is currently the Dean and Professor of the University of the Philippines Asian Center, or UPAC. He also served as a chairperson of the UP Tri-College PhD Philippine Studies Program and is a faculty affiliate of the UP Open University ASEAN Graduate Studies Program. Dr. Santarita completed his doctoral degree in South Asian Studies from the National University of Singapore, his master's degree in Asian Studies at the UPAC, and his bachelor's degree in History and Community Development from UP Visayas. His research interests and publications focus on Indian studies, migration studies, Philippine culture and society, maritime history, blue economy, and ASEAN studies. Moreover, Dr. Santarita was a recipient of several awards and grants such as the Fulbright Scholar in Residence Program, German Academics Exchange Service, Southwest Pacific Dialogue, Art and Culture Scholarship, and the Japan ASEAN Youth Fellowship, among others. He also received the 2016 to 2018 and 2019 to 2021 one UP Professorial Chair Awards, UPD Centennial Professorial Chairs, and several international publication awards since 2012. In 2019, he was awarded Gawad Chancellor para sa natatanging guro, the university's highest distinction for exemplary performance in teaching. Aside from journal articles, book chapters, and this book, he also published in 2019 a book, 2018 Philippine Development Report, with Dr. Noel Christian Moratilla as co-editor and Hainan Normal University as publisher. I would also like to note that Dr. Moratilla have also been an important figure in the development of this book. So thank you, Dr. Moratilla. And in 2020, the Toyota in the Philippines, 30 years and beyond in nation building. So we are very thankful to have Dr. Joefe Santarita to become a part of this program. So before we officially proceed to the introduction of the content of the book, I would like to introduce our president, Dr. Arlene Abuid Paderanga, to officially give us the foreword, an inspirational message, and to give us the important backdrop for this project. So Dr. Abuid Paderanga, you may now take the floor.
Nakamute yata.
Okay. A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. I'm so excited about this project, our book launch. So I will be just reading what I have written in the foreword of the book, which is very true to our hearts. So if I may proceed, please. Over the years, AIMS cultivated a culture of research, which is instituted in policies and our practices. The AIMS Museo Maritimo is an example of this effort. Today, in conjunction to the International Museum Day, AIMS, together with Dr. Joefe Santarita, is proud to launch a maritime book entitled Plying the Straits, Batel Mobilities in Central Philippines. This book is another initiative that complements the entire research buildup of AIMS. The Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, Efthymios Mitropoulos, described Filipino seafarer as the unsung heroes of an unsung industry. Filipinos comprised 1/4 of the global seafarers, and together they remitted 6.539 billion US dollars, or around 326 or 327 Philippine billion pesos in 2019. Their contribution is not limited to the Philippine economy. They are in charge of the global logistics system that underpins the entire global economy. Despite the major contribution of Filipino seafarers to the Philippine economy, it is unfortunate that maritime discourse has been limited to the economic and business domain. The scant literature and the absence of maritime-centric historical discourse limits our appreciation of our past as a seafaring nation. It is significant to remember that behind the veneer of a modern Filipino seafarer stands a millennium-old continuation of a rich maritime history and heritage. Throughout the millennia, the seas functioned as an organizing principle for the Filipino people. From the great Austronesian migrations to the sails of the galleons, Filipinos have always been shaped by the seas, thereby forging a unique national identity. The series of interactions of Filipinos through the seas from the past and present continually or continuously enmesh the Filipino people in the global maritime industry. However, the insularity of the maritime industry in the Philippines, with a singular focus in manning capacities and the economy at large, diminishes the appreciation and connection of Filipino seafarers with its long and continuous maritime legacy. The challenge to integrate the rich Philippine maritime heritage and history into the consciousness of young seafarers is a responsibility of maritime higher learning institutions. For decades, the emphasis on technical training removed the generation of cultural meaning from the profession and removed the historical backdrop that forms as a narrative for the entire industry. Our collaboration with Dr. Joefe Santarita supports the research direction of AIMS and displays our commitment to advance a research-oriented institution. Complementing our core competencies in the maritime, engineering, and heritage education, this project helps AIMS to connect and give a historical backdrop to the technical and vocational orientation of the maritime profession. This book provides a valuable window on early Filipino boat technologies that made communities and the transfer of commodities mobile. Most importantly, Dr. Santarita addresses the common assumption that the Philippines is a maritime nation despite limited literature. I always say that the true character of a nation is revealed by its people's education and culture. We should always remember that our current position in the global maritime industry as a nation did not happen by accident. Rather, it is a byproduct of our millennium-old maritime history. This book is a great step towards building a maritime narrative, not only for Filipino seafarers, but also for the Filipino people. The seas have always been an ethos of Filipino society. As the Philippines celebrates the quinquennial anniversary of the first circumnavigation of the world, this book and the commitment for a maritime national identity constitute a great leap as we rediscover our maritime history and heritage. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present to you the author and a true advocate of Philippine maritime history, Dr. Joefe B. Santarita. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arlene Abued Padiranga, the president of the Asian Institute of Maritime Studies.
Welcome.
Uh, can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, very much.
So I will share my screen now. Okay, so can you see the screen? Okay, sige. So thank you very much for your generous support, President Arlene Abued Padiranga of the Asian Institute of Maritime Studies. Before I proceed, I would like to greet my friends and colleagues. A pleasant afternoon to all. Mayong hapon to my colleagues in UP Visayas and in Visayan regions. Magandang hapon to my colleagues in UP Diliman and Ames. Guten Morgen to my friend in Austria. Namaste to my Indian friends. Pleasant afternoon to all. So I would like to dedicate this book to my two life mentors. They're no longer with us today, but their advices remain and constantly reminding me of to work and excel with dignity and respect. So to my paternal grandfather, Hilarion Postrero Santarita, and of course to my undergraduate advisor and mentor, Dr. Henry Florida Fontecha. Thank you very much for that. Before I proceed, I should not miss by thanking actually the people and individuals and institutions who really helped me in making this project possible. So of course to President Arlene Padiranga, thank you very much for the support, to Museum Maritimo, and to the team, particularly to Daryl Lawrence Alvarico and Ken Franco for the editing and as well as for the cover design. To Dr. Noel Christian Moratilla and Mr. Victor Kahala of the Asian, of course, Dr. Moratilla is in the Asian Center, and Mr. Victor Kahala of the Asian Institute of Maritime Studies for the review and for the comments. Thank you very much. I should not miss actually the local government units in Western Visayas with 11 case studies. So I'd like to thank all the support from barangay captains to mayors and of course other officials. For the Center for Integrative and Development Studies, the Center for West Visayan Studies in UPV, the UPV Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Extension, of course my cash office family in UPV, the Division of Social Sciences of the College of Arts and Sciences of UP Visayas, the UP Visayas Library in Miagao and Iloilo campuses, and I think they are represented here. Of course, I'd like to thank also the individuals, particular ng Laura and of course ng Dayan and Nona of the OVCRE. Of course, the CWBS, we have Randy, Bing, and Iliod. Of course, in DDSS, I think, of course, the late Sir Henry, Mami Mel, and Mami Loy, who is currently joining us, and other former colleagues, the city friends. I should not miss to thank, of course, Karen Gayanilo, my research assistant, who really helped in making this particular project for the last 2 decades. I'd like to thank also Irene Bel Plotenia and Christine Sarito for the updates. My Asian Center family, particularly Gel, Tax, and Mila. Of course, the alba of my life, Weng, and my parents and in-laws and nephews and nieces. And to him for all his guidance and love in this worldly trip, especially during the rough waves and strong winds while plying my strait. I'd like to go back to the first slide because I think this afternoon is indeed a celebration because this is the release of my first book as a sole author among the many books that we published already in the past. I'm also thankful to Daryl for changing the date from May 5 to May 18. If you notice, it's still May 5 in the Facebook promotion. I was thankful that he suggested to put this on May 18 because if it was pushed through, I might be compelled to launch the book from the Philippine General Hospital after recovering from a severe COVID-19 condition. So pardon me if I have to, for a while, I have to stop for a while to catch my breath. Okay, maybe one must wondering why the title Plying the Straits, Batel Mobilities in Central Philippines. So while Central Philippines is the focus of this study, the case study covers only the region of Western Visayas. It is composed of 6 provinces, namely Iloilo, Capiz, Antique, and Aklan in the island of Panay, and the provinces of Guimaras and Negros Occidental. In the Batil trading experience, the native entrepreneurs of the provinces facing the 2 straits are the active participants in this commercial intercourse in the region. Panay Gulf is composed of 2 straits, kaya nga it's Plying the Straits, Iloilo and Guimaras. And the focus is on Batel and the mobilities of both the ship and the shipped. Okay, so it's the boat and the cargos, which I will discuss later. The contents of the book is actually divided into 5 chapters. Chapter 1 covers the mobilities in the sea. Chapter 2 is on the ship mobilities or the boat or vessels mobilities. And this one is the case of Batel in Central Philippines. The third is the ship mobilities or the cargos. And that would mean people and goods, migration and trade by Batel. The fourth will be the immobilities and the decline of the Batel operation. And the fifth one, the last chapter, is the impact and prospect of the Batel mobilities. So the first is the mobilities. Chapter 1 is the mobilities and in the sea. No? So please bear with me for a few minutes because I'm going to just give you a glimpse of the discussion, no? Or the possible deliberations in following chapters. But the methods that we used together with Karen Gayanilo in documenting the flight and the plight of the Batel, please take note that sometimes it's pronounced as Batil with an I. You know? So but generally people would simply use Batel. This study used interview to create a general picture of the trading pattern in these particular points of the Visayas. Informants were the immediate relatives of the boat owners and surviving crews of the Batel. So if you notice in the picture, these people were also interviewed while they're working in the repair of the boat. No? Also serving as respondents were some fisher folks, farmers and merchants from various points of Western Visayas. In fact, of the Visayas, including Bantayan, who were involved in this trading. As a supplement, library materials such as books, municipal fiestas, summer programs, research reports, and other documents from various historical centers in the region and in Manila, as well as photo documentations, sketches, and drawings were also employed. So being an archipelago with more than 7,000 islands, the Philippines is blessed to have seas with an estimated surface area of about 5 million square kilometers. So despite its importance and the very nature of the country, it is lamentable that maritime studies with special emphasis on the role of the boats remains limited. So the absence of the sea from explicitly focused mobilities research may in part be attributed to the material and metaphysical zone in which ships are often put to work, and that is the sea. The sea's position in the background of mobility studies across the broader tendency in Western thought to see the sea as lifeless, a backdrop, a realm distinct and distant from the land. The sea has been traditionally been understood in terms of emptiness, disorder, and danger, a space antithetical to the land. Though it needs to be noted that such views have their own histories and geographies that are far from universal or constant. The sea has for a long time been seen as a space to be crossed as quickly as possible to reach the places that matter, particularly the grounded centers of capital. I used in this study 2 prominent ideas or concepts. by mobility scholars. One of that is the study made by Anim Adu, Hayes, and Peters, and the other one by Tim Criswell. Here, Anim Adu, Hayes, and Peters believe that the sea is the rich space for examination of mobilities, being mobile, four-dimensional plateau in and of itself that is assembled in wider constellations of motionful elements such as the subject to winds, if it is particularly yung sinasabi ni Ma'am Edna ko, who's joining us about the Batel, no? Based on sail, no? Dependent to or subject to winds, or even to gravitation, pull of the moon, and so forth and so on. So moreover, it is a space, which I like. This one is actually I like most. It is a space, the sea is a space, through which and under which technologies, people, and commodities are made mobile. In the study of the sea, one cannot simply ignore the role of the vessel or the watercraft in the development of civilization and facilitation of mobilities for generations. And this practically holds water still in the case of the Philippines, which until now is subject to, which is now greatly dependent to the sea for its sustenance and mobilities. So the fragmented character of the Philippines points to the necessity of establishing vital linkages between the islands. A viable transportation system thus becomes a very important element in the nation's economic and social development, where the mobility of people and the movement of goods and services played the critical role. As such, the existence of transport system in which change and transform the geographic or the spatial dimension or geographic space through technological innovations and place atmospheric conditions such as the trade winds and water currents that has facilitated the growth of the economy long before the invention of the motor or of the engine. So for years, inter-island transportation has become the effective way to link various production and consumption means to facilitate mobility and the presence of markets. So in this book, mobility and trade are the important concepts that are employed to explain the role of the Batel in facilitating the movement of goods and thereby allowing for the development of trading nodes or trading hubs and markets in various parts of Central Philippines. So let me just point out that two concepts emphasized by Hayes and Peters. Ship mobilities refers to the movements of the seagoing vessels. So I'm talking here of the movements of boats or watercraft or water vessels. And the ship mobility is referring to the cargoes, not only cargoes or movements of goods, but also to the flows of capital, even to the transmission of ideas. And we have to take note that the ship is both a moving thing and a mover of things that cannot be easily separated. No? So it's a moving element and a mover of things. While the case of the Batil does not go beyond the construct of a nation state, it does touch on the conceptualization of territory and the building of a community through the new migrants as promoted by pangangayo or migration, which I think Ma'am Miloy is very interested about this, and thus requires continuous interaction with their immediate and extended families, as well as friends left in the place of origin. In the study of the Batel, the aspects of mobilities, as mentioned by Tim Criswell, such as the motive force, I use this as the dimension or characteristics to fit or to examine the Batel. So motive force, velocity, the rhythm, route, experience, and friction, as mentioned by Criswell. No? So while Criswell or Tim Criswell talks on this in a more generic terms and setting, his ideas on journeys are applicable to both, such as the force that drives them, the speed of travel, the friction that stops or prevents the journey, and the rhythm that shapes movements. These aspects are discussed in the succeeding chapters in the context of the local experience. Motive force, for instance, velocity and rhythm are discussed in chapter 2, while route and experience are deliberated in Chapter 3. And the last aspect is the friction, which is examined in Chapter 4. So the saga of ships and ship mobilities continued at the turn of the 19th century in the Philippines, particularly in the Visayan region. If you ask me whether Batel is actually indigenous, I may say it's not indigenous, it's indigenized. They use the word indigenize. I will explain that later on, but I don't have that strong materials or documents to support it for now. No? But it's a continuing study. But I will say it is indigenized. The growing sugar industry in the island of Negros has spawned the need for watercraft that could bring the goods to the market. But along with the products, it also became evident that these water vessels were necessary to transport the people who owned the farms and those who worked the land. Many of the landed individuals purchased their property in the outlying sections of Negros Occidental that they eventually converted into sugarcane plantations or haciendas. To inspect their haciendas and to bring in the seasonal workers, they rode the batel or simply used the lorcha. No? As early as 1862, there were water transport that plied Iloilo and Antique Capiz in the island of Negros. So this scenario created a demand for more boats to transport passengers and sugar cargoes. This is supported by the accounts of Jules Ledesma recalling his family travails. His grandfather, Julio Ledesma, was at one time the largest sugar planter in the Philippines. He and his group of sugar planters in 1930s were sick and tired of traveling to Negros from Iloilo by Batel because it was slow, and started to ferry service, which served as the progenitor of Negros navigation. However, because of the high fare rates charged by the steamers and by the boat, steamboats, many people still relied on sailboats or batel owned by Filipino and Chinese mestizos. Aside from this reason, another factor was that sailboats can land anywhere or even into rivers close to the towns or haciendas that aided people in reaching their towns. So I'll just, because of the long discussion, maybe I'll just point out some of the anecdotes or stories about related or linked to Batel. No? This could be substantiated by the account of Philippine tycoon Vicente Madrigal. He mentioned in his diary in 1943 that there was an unseasonable typhoon that destroyed the shade and warehouse of his Port Lamon Lumber Company in Surigao in Mindanao and caused the disappearance of his heavy machinery. So he sent his men to check using the batel. Tomas Confisor from Iloilo, local hero, together with 53 other passengers, boarded the batel named Agkawan from Taal, Batangas to Boruanga, Capiz to get back to Panay following the Japanese forces in Manila in 1942. Same thing for General Vicente Lim on his attempt to escape from the Japanese from Batangas to Negros on June 2 of 1944. And the plan was to link up in Negros with a submarine, supposedly that would take him to Australia. In the waters between Maricaban and Verde Islands, the batel carrying General Lim was intercepted by Japanese patrol boat. The Filipino guerrilla, such as Lieutenant Gregorio Limhoco, used the batel also to go to Panay to learn tactics and strategies from the best organized and best equipped guerrillas in the Philippines, and that is in Iloilo. He also went to Mindoro and Tablas Island from Batangas in 1943. And in 1944, Lieutenant Limhoco and his companions sailed from Mindoro via Boracay and Tablas Island to Batangas, bringing with them the propaganda papers, chocolates, cigarettes, undershirts, sewing kits, and medicines. Another interesting but questionable story is linked to the batel. That is linked to the batel was the guerrilla experience of then Lieutenant Ferdinand Marcos during the war. Now, I will not elaborate on this. Maybe you can read some of those discussions in the book. No? Another interesting anecdote on Batel during the war was the smuggling of the only copy of the Japanese propaganda film Dawn of Freedom out of the country. The guerrillas got only copy for exhibition to local films in Pampanga and brought it to Bawan, Batangas. From there, it was loaded to a batel on its way to Negros. And reaching Negros, the film was finally loaded into a submarine to be brought to Australia. Another romantic story is it's a romantic story. The batel was also used by Emma Montinola, who was sent back to Iloilo in the care of her betrothed Jose Ledesma. And she rode the batel for 6 days from Tayabas to Panay. Another interesting story related to batil is the life story of the late tycoon John Gokongwei, which is also tied, at least a part of it, to the batel. In 1957, this is a post-war story, the start of his batel age, he rode the small, very utilitarian boat, unquote, that defied the open sea and would take him farther from Cebu and all the way to Lucena, from where he would take a truck to Manila. The sea trips could take 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the weather, and the land trips another 5 to 6 hours. On the batel, John Gokongwei read books like Gone with the Wind under the great blue sky to pass away the time. Once, his batel hit actually a rock and sank. He was saved by the tires that he was selling in Manila because he and his trader companions held on to those tires, and in a way, those traders saved all his tires. Another good example is William Chongyan, who chartered a batel to bring him to other islands, where he bartered whatever saleable items he could source, dried fish, sugar, and cigarettes from Ormoc Leyte. And of course, there were also documents saying that the batel was used to travel from Mindoro to Panay and Palawan. There was a connection before to Mindoro across Tablas Strait, and this was mainly done by Batel Aida, which connected up to Palawan and Semirara Islands. Now I'll proceed now to chapter 2, very short. So I will still use Creswell's dimensions of mobility, such as the motive force, velocity, rhythm, route, experience, and friction. And to recall, Creswell talks on the journeys that are applicable to both, such as force that drives them, the speed of travel, the friction that stops or prevents the journey, and the rhythm that shapes movements, and the route of travel and the experiences of those who live the experience or such movements. For this chapter, force, velocity, and rhythm are examined in the context of the batil building experience. So the motive force is both figurative and literal in nature. Figurative, since the real force why people invested in the construction of the batil is basically triggered by economic benefits. Needless to say, the locality where the batil were constructed are located in the coastal areas, which is the most obvious reason why people push for the building of the watercraft. And the abundance of the raw materials in the locality or in the immediate neighborhood also qualified as the motive force. And this is the boat I think I took in Bantayan Island. And generally, based on our study with Karen in our survey, the batil is considered as a sailboat, sometimes called a big sailboat in ferrying goods and passengers. Based on the result of our survey, the studied boats are approximately built from 17.75 to as long as 82 feet long, 5 to 25 feet wide, and 4 to 10 feet deep from the rim. For passengers, the batil can carry about 30 to 100 passengers and has the capacity to convey about 10 to 120 tons of assorted cargoes, depending on size proportion. The materials used in batil construction, this is actually a good example of lawaan, but it is not surprising that lawaan remains the popular choice of the builders, since it is available in the area, particularly in Guimaras, and that it grow enlarged enough for the baroto, or for the boat from 120 centimeters wide to be hewn out of single trunk. In fact, this is the kind of wood preferred even by the Visayan boat builders or carpenters in the pre-colonial period. So the common sail used in the early period are the cotonia and mantalona cloth. Though bought at a higher price, these materials, usually coming from Iloilo City, are considered durable and well suited for the sail of the batel. However, during the second half of the 1900s, the owners decided to use the cheap or affordable plastic materials as a good substitute of cloth. Please take note that there are also boats or batil owners that use mango tree as materials for their boat. No? So even the kamachili and apitong and Madrid de cacao, no? Jackfruit also, they're using that. As discussed, actually there are three types of boats or batel in Western Visayas and generally I think in Central Philippines. We have here trading points from Nueva Valencia, Buena Vista. These are actually the towns in the province of Guimaras, Dumangas, Gimbal, Miagao, and San Joaquin in the province of Iloilo. No? So technically there are many dilayag or sail operated batil, and there are only 19 batil or vessels operated or run by the motor or engine, and there are 7 only for both dilayag and the motor. So in total, there are about 77 documented, but we surveyed more than that, 100 plus, I think 130 plus vessels, but only those that are well documented and that the owners can recall about the nature of their vessels. That's the reason why we end up of only 77. So a batil dilayag is obviously run by sail. It's much dependent on the wind velocity. Usually the boat has a mast or a palo where the sail is attached. And the shape of the batil dilayag is totally different from that of the traditional boat. Its speed varies according to the wind direction. In some instances, the crew of the batil can employ this what we call a zigzag system, known locally as linagari, zigzag, and manage to conduct the batil fast despite the wind and water disturbance. So a quartermaster sees to it that the boat changes its course from time to time by partially sliding to the major wind path and move again to the normal course until it slowly moves towards the horizon. So there were also cases when the boat tarries in the middle of the sea when no wind, a wave that is strong enough to move it. And the situation is known as nagapautaw-utaw in Hiligaynon, or just simply floating. The building of the batel, we have the bow, the stern, and of course the mid, the ribs, no, or the mid section of the boat. And the other dimension of the mobilities is the rhythm, which I classified into 2 types. In the case of the batel, the first type refers to the rhythm of building the batel, which starts from the construction to the actual operation. The production of the boat itself for some carpenters is like repeating the same pattern from one boat to the other, or even on the same boat during the repair for the whole year round. This rhythm has been repeated also from one batel to the other, and such pattern has been followed by others in different localities. So the latter is the second type of where bandwagoning is happening within the locality and among kits and kings. So the construction of the batel usually takes 5 months as long as there are no financial or material problems encountered during the course of the building. Boat making is preferably done during summer. Conventionally, the batel is made near the bodies of water, like rivers and deltas. The purpose for this is to eliminate, if not to lessen rather, the burden of the owner launching the vessel when it's already finished or completed. Traditionally, the launching of the batel requires men to pull the vessels. Manually, it is finally floating in the water. With the introduction of the motor engines, however, the boat builders or owners contrive less expense yet effective strategy by employing another operational batil de motor to pull slowly the finished one from the shore until it successfully floats. So while the process is going on, few people were employed to hold the ropes tied in the boat, prow and stern, and to ensure the balance until it finally touches the water. So the scheme is undertaken smoothly. The new batel is placed between newly cut down coconut trees heavily coated with grease to become slippery. And this innovation requires less workers as well as expenses. So sorry, it's quite small, but I'm just showing you the number of batel owners that we interviewed in Nueva Valencia and in Buenavista, Guimaras. So there are about 32 owners in Nueva Valencia and about 7 in Buenavista, Guimaras. And then this is what we call as the second type of rhythm, which is the band. So the ship mobility, so we have here, as I mentioned, the mobilities of products, animals, people, and ideas. In an island-studded nation, trade and commerce by water become critical to national, political, and economic unity. And in the Philippines, this natural need is heightened by the development of hundreds and separate producing areas, each supplying commodities to and requiring goods from other regions or islands. Thus, it is not surprising that the water transport, including the batel, played a significant role in the development of the Philippines, particularly the island economy. So the presence of the batel, just like any inter-island water transportation, is extremely favored by two geographic elements, namely the short distances between ports and the sheltered waters to be navigated. The ship mobilities facilitated by batel in central Philippines are categorized into 7 major routes. The routes are between Guimaras and Iloilo, Guimaras and southern Philippines, southern Negros, Guimaras and northern Negros, Guimaras and Cebu, Iloilo and southern Negros, Iloilo and northern Negros, and the route within the coastal areas in Iloilo. And there are also narratives of special and chartered trips, which are actually documented at the end of this chapter. In each route, the discussion is also classified per cargo. So if you notice then the trading nodes, for instance, we categorize also the cargo. So under the Guimaras Iloilo routes, we have the sand and gravel, stones, lime, firewood, copra, and rice. For Guimaras Southern Negros routes, we have firewood, lumber, and of course passengers. In the Iloilo Northern Negros routes, we have lime, firewood and copra, cement, of course rice, soft hard drinks, and Chinese merchandises, particularly groceries, the materials for hardware. To continue, we have the Iloilo Southern Negros routes, of course, lumber rice, passengers, fruits and craft, fish products, and live animals. This is actually the most documented route or routes in the study because we focused more on Iloilo, rather Guimaras, Gimbal, Southern Negros, Miagao, and San Joaquin. And by the way, this is also my undergraduate thesis with Dr. Fontecha, Dr. Miloy Mabunay, and Dr. Melanie Padilla as member of my panel. The Iloilo Guimaras Cebu routes, we have passengers at the same time the chicken manure or chicken dung. Very important to the fish ponds. This is actually greatly elaborated, discussed in this particular chapter, why we have a constant or frequent interaction with the Cebuanos, particularly in the Bantayan Island. We have also some connections within Panay Island, and of course the chartered trip Among the most interesting stories in the chartered trips is that all of the batil of Mr. Hiraldoy from Guimaras were cargo vessels. However, in special cases, it was permitted to transport around 200 passengers from Iloilo to Bugsok Island in Palawan as workers in the coconut plantation of the former First Lady Imelda Marcos. In this particular situation, a special permit was requested from the Philippine Coast Guard before the boat was officially permitted to set sail. There was even a time that, this is another case of Pablo Espesos Batel, that conveyed damples or skin of bacao tree and raha taken from Palawan to either Iloilo City or Bacolod City or even to the southern towns of Negros Occidental. In the 1940s, the fare of the bundle of firewood cost 1 peso only. And the owner remembered that the boat cargo capacity was 17 tons. And in the summary, in the list of the cargoes ferried by the Batel, so the highest I think is rice, and followed by soft drinks and stones. But there are also live animals carried by the boat, particular cattle, cows, and carabao. And to some extent, groceries and firewood and copra and hard and soft drinks. So the movement of people, or movements of people, or mobilities of people, I think Guimaras Batel did not only bring only cargos, but also people. In their constant contact, they develop a special relation between the Pangayaw and the Dumaan, or the native. And some of them married, for instance, a Sipalainon from the Sipalay in southern part of Negros Occidental, and eventually settled in the area. And a good example is the Ganancial family, whose ancestor came from Guimaras and to some extent from Guimbal. No? Of course, the Sacadas, or the seasonal workers from the southern parts of Iloilo and the province of Antique, also used Batel to travel and reach Negros, particularly Hinigaran. In Gimbal, the watercraft usually carry about 350 to 500 sacks of palay and other products, plus 50 passengers at a time, mostly Sakada from Gimbal and Igbaras, who work in the sugarcane plantation in Negros. At that time, take note, they only collected 50 cents per passenger per trip. So it's considered very cheap fare compared to the steamships fare of about 1 peso and 50 pesos, 1 peso and 50 cents per trip. During the November to January, harvesters or Manugarab came to harvest pala in Hinigaran, especially in the barangays of Candumaraw and Tagda, and they preferred to stay in the latter where the Batel usually docked. In Miagao, the passengers were mostly fisher folks, farmers, seasonal harvesters, and merchants. And please take note, there were even contractors who made arrangements for a bulk of passengers going to a certain hacienda or certain area in Negros. It's also good to point out that in 1940, and I think Ma'am Edna will be happy to know this, Batangas, there were Batels are supplied from Batangas to all parts of Visayas and special trip to Zamboanga and Hulo. In 1942, this is based on a document I gathered. There was actually a sailboat shipping corporation with Sergio Osmeña as the president. There was the Batel named Maria Socorro, which rather plied and carried actually passengers from Luzon to Visayas, from Manila to Capiz, Iloilo City, and Cadiz in Negros Occidental, in northern part of Negros. There was also the Batel Maria Paz from Manila to Bantayan to Bugo, now Bugo City, and Cebu City, and Dumaguete, Negros Oriental. In 1944, there was actually a Batel also from Muelle de la Industria in Binondo to Cebu. And once a month, a Batel also ferried people from Manila to Coron in Palawan. And there were chartered trips, 200 passengers from, as I mentioned, from Iloilo to Bugsok Island in Palawan. The Maria Socorro, Batel Maria Socorro was asking for 20 pesos per trip, no? Because the Maria Socorro is supposed to be the flagship of the Sailboat Shipping Corporation of 96-ton vessel and the biggest batel in the Philippines during this time. Now in the chapter 4, konti na lang po, we have the immobilities and the decline of the batel operation. Friction is the last part of Creswell's dimension of mobilities. This situation refers to the immobilities of the batel leading to the demise or the death or the natural death of the operation. Upon examination of the length of the operation of the batel, which have available data, majority of the batel are operating between 11 to 20 years. And the table will show that 20 of those watercraft aged between 1 to 2 decades are stationed in Nueva Valencia, with only one in Dumangas. And therefore, we can say that there are several factors affecting the demise or the end of the operation of the batel. And the reasons, just like humans, the water vessels, after many years of promoting mobilities in the locality, such as the batel, have their own lifespan. The vessel's length of operation are primarily caused by immobilities, the frictions, turbulence, stasis, and flow of supply chains that can be traced from the ship itself. Most of the working wooden boats in the region gradually left the phantom of the Philippine Maritime scenario due to the unavailability of the cargoes to be transported. It is difficult for the owners and patrons to sustain the enterprise without sufficient income from the transportation and hauling services provided by the batel. So this phenomenon is best supported by the enumeration of factors leading to the steady disappearance of these water vessels in the region. Like for instance, we have no cargo available in the latter part, bankruptcy, even decay, and the rotten condition of the boats. They encountered sea mishaps. Some of them are sold. The lack of trees and timber, not only for cargoes, but also for maintenance. There's a strong competition on the steel ships. And of course, no one will manage because the owner or the patron is already old or sickly. So another thing is the imposition of the lag ban by the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources during the time of President Marcos. And there was a closure of the the sawmills. And therefore this closure did not only trigger the meager of supply of lumber for household and construction purposes, but also for the maintenance of the batel. Although the owners tried to use the available trees in the locality, but these were not sufficient to cater the needs of the boat. So thus, they simply forced the owners to acquire lumber as far as Mindanao in a higher price. And the declaration of the martial law paved the way for the closing of sawmills in Negros. And the closure of these lumber mills was the result of the lag ban and the lack of trees in the area for maintenance of the boat, also considered to be one of the reasons why the batel owners stopped their operation. Now, another thing, maybe it's good also to show the comparison of the ship and batel expenses from Yagao to Hinigran and Pontevedra. Although, as I mentioned, it could be another factor why it attracted even some people to patronize the batel rather than the ship. But this is a good recollection of the expenses, and it turned out that the batel is cheaper by half compared to say steamship. This is actually the rough computation from Dolores Nabua when she traveled from Miagao, Iloilo to Pontevedra and Negros Occidental, and therefore found out that riding on a batel will save almost half of the travel cost spent when riding a ship. So the last part is the Batel Mobilities impact and prospects. The impact, I have to just cut it short, no, but I think straightforward naman, because of course the income and influence at the very beginning, it also provided the owners the opportunity to send their children to school, sending them to higher education, the provision of more jobs and business opportunities, because it's not just only the Batel owner who is benefiting from it, but also the crew, and even those volanteros and volanteras, or the ambulant traders, and even those who are offering coffee shops and cafeteria in the area. The expansion of nodes and nearby areas is very important also. The augment locals and available materials. No? So for those, like for instance, those that cannot be accommodated by regular boats, such as stones and limestones and the lime and other products, it can be transported possibly by the Batel. The increase of the population, the expansion of local bureaucracy. I already mentioned about the establishment or the advent of people from, say, Iloilo to Negros, and eventually because of the constant contact with the people and the decision to stay in the place of destination, eventually expanded the local bureaucracy, and the documents will prove, for instance, that the constant migration of Miagawanon, Gimbalanon, and San Joaquino from San Joaquin, Iloilo, had created 6 more barrios or barangays in the town of Hinigaran, which is located in the southern part of Negros Occidental. So at the very beginning, they just simply harvesters, ambulant workers, seasonal laborers, but they decided eventually to settle in the area, and eventually led to the creation of the new barangays of Aranda, Candumarao, Kiwi, Himaya, Tagda, all of the municipality of Hinigaran. Same for the municipality of Himamaylan, in the barangay of Agisan, a coastal area of the town, to be one of its barangay. Another thing is the expansion of the socio-cultural services. And of course, the presence of the Patadyong weaving heritage in southern Negros. And the second one is the influence of Karaya or Kinaraya language. The last one is the ecological degradation. Although the impact is quite negative. The existence of the Batel contributed to the denudation of the environment. Basically, Batel were made of wood, and the supply materials in the locality cannot support the needed requirements. That some owners brought lumber from sawmills of southern Negros Occidental, or forced to cut down trees in some towns of Iloilo. Before the restriction was imposed, bulk of stones was transported from the island of Guimaras. In fact, only this January 2020, reports of huge volumes of sand and aggregates were being quarried from portions of the Halawar River in Barangay Balud of the municipality of Saraga and Barangay Bantud Fabrica of Dumangas, using 4 Batel. And the barangay officials of Bantud Fabrica described the quarrying as massive, that might have adverse environmental consequences. Now from impact, let's proceed to prospects. So provision of the basic sources of data for intelligent planning. So basically, basic sources of data are indispensable for intelligent planning and should be immediately developed so as to provide a factual base for future planning. So at present, there are no sources of definite data on the domestic operation of the Batel. Basically, it's not only the Batel, but other indigenous and local watercrafts in the area are not definitely well documented. This can only be remedied if the government, either local or national, will designate employees who will supervise and maintain current incoming and outgoing freight as well as passengers. So this valuable data would be collected that would serve for planning and supervisory purposes. Second is the institutionalization of the inter-island shipping code. Once definite data were assembled and analyzed, an inter-island shipping code could be instituted and implemented by local bureaucracies in the respective domains. So of course, the regulation as to the safety and sanitation, route structures, and rare standardization should be initiated and uniformly enforced. And has to be supervised by Marina and the Philippine Coast Guard. constantly and indiscriminately enforcing, which is actually the key to the proper function of such program. Third is the implementation of the gradual replacement or renovation scheme of those dilapidated and unattended batel. Although I have some reservation now because there is actually a plan in 2021 to phase out all wooden-based vessels or watercraft as part of the modernization from a wooden to a what you call this plastic-based vessel. And of course, there's another impact or another factor will be the plan of the construction of bridges from Iloilo to Negros. So they might have an effect also to not only to Batel, but also to all wooden vessels. The third is the implementation, as I mentioned, renovation scheme of the dilapidated, unattended Batel. It should be assessed whether it is dangerous or not. It should be still seaworthy and should not be given permit to operate and ply the straits for safety reasons. The fourth is the provision of incentive grants to those who will reopen and reoperationalize the old battle routes. And the government should encourage and give incentives and special privileges, particularly to tax exemption for the first 5 years of operation to the batel operators who have the nerve to retrace and reoperationalize the old routes formerly plied by these vessels. Due consideration should be given to those places which are not successfully serviced by big shipping lines. And the last suggestion is organizing a regional annual Batel Festival, and the government through the Department of Tourism should also look for the possibility of making boat or Batel building tradition in Guimaras, at least in Guimaras, as one of the kindly a tourist attraction in the island. A special competition or exhibit among the expert carpenters and builders should be initiated to showcase the creativity and ingenuity of the Ilonggos in Batel trading. One thing more is that I think it's also good that the province of Guimaras or even Iloilo should restore one old dilapidated batel and put this in a museum. Not necessarily for touristic, but perhaps to remind us of our maritime heritage in the area. We have a batel actually exhibited in Negros Museum, but I'm not so sure if we have a batil exhibit in Guimaras, because Guimaras is supposed to be the hub of the batil building tradition in the area. So with that, I think I'll end my discussion for open forum if there are some questions. Thank you very much for listening and for sharing with me this time to launch this very important project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Santarita, for that very comprehensive presentation regarding the Batel Mobilities in Central Visayas. And thank you for documenting Batel history and considering the fact that he's a very important piece in our history. So we in Museo Maritime, one of our projects is to really form a national maritime narrative to really present the maritime history of the Philippines. And this project, Dr. Santarita, particularly Batel Mobilities, it's really a key part in our efforts because it is an important piece for the entire maritime storyline of the Philippines. So right now we have questions. I'll open the floor for the questions. So I'll first start with Mr. Meloy Mabunay. His question is, first his message is congratulations, Sir Joefe. Probably you know him personally. He said that, I assume that your data basically covers the early 20th century experience of Batel in the region. So Sir Meloy is curious if you have encountered any trading and transport of sibukao, sapan wood as dyewood for export carried on the Batel from Guimaras.
Yeah, that is Mameloy. Yeah, I think, yes, ma'am, I encountered, but I did not include this because uh, one is that needs to be verified because it was mentioned even at the early times during the 16th century about, although again, whether it is actually Batel, no? So related to sorry, it's not 16th, but about 17th century. Um, in the study about uh, the use of the sibukao, uh, particularly with the Chinese. No? It was not mentioned about the sampan or the Chinese vessel, but it mentioned about batil. So I'm still verifying it, Ma'am Miloy. I'd like to share that maybe in the next study about the use, not just only sibukao, but it mentioned also about another type of the mangrove, you know, in the trading with the early Filipinos and the Chinese. So I'll try to share that later with you. As of the, I'm not so sure about from Guimaras, but it was mentioned, so I'll try to look for that, no, whether it is really from Guimaras or mentioning only that from Iloilo. Sige. I hope I answered that, but right now, Mamiloy, I can only say that I encountered that, and I'm willing to share that to you later on.
Okay, for our second question, it comes from Mr. Philip Paret. His question, sir, is number one, what type of wood was preferred by the Batel builders that they had to source it all the way from Mindanao? And number two, where and how do we order purchase this book? Regarding this, I'll answer it later at the end of the program. And I would like to send his congratulations to Mr. Joefe.
Yeah, maybe the first, I can only answer for the first question. So the type of wood is actually lawaan. It's the most preferred because of, as I mentioned, it's quite long and most sturdy. So the preferred wood is lawaan. And if the absence of the other materials, they would use the local materials or local trees available in the locality. So yeah.
So this is in conjunction to the question of to the question earlier. So Miss Edna ko is asking us if Sir Joefe, you will have a sequence for this book or larger plans for expanding its content.
Yeah, as I'm hoping that, you know, because Ma'am Edna is also sharing a story of her father. This is actually, I'm looking on a larger, maybe with the generosity again of Ames or with other sponsors later on. And of course, I'd like to involve the University of the Philippines Visayas for this. Um, my intention is to go further with the whole, because I believe, Ma'am Edna, I'm just only touching a small portion of the Batil narrative, and it's good perhaps to look at on Batil in the whole Philippines, and maybe even as far as Sabah, because we encountered, Karen, we encountered a study on this, on a narrative about the possible chartered trips to Borneo and as far as Palawan, and we suspect that the Batel were also utilized to travel and reach even as far as Indonesia. No? So we can settle maybe for the whole Philippines only, but we don't know the extent of the narrative and the manuscript, maybe the experience of our people, because the Philippines is a maritime nation. So we can just simply look, Ma'am Edna, for now for the entire Philippines, hopefully.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for really hopeful to have an expanded form of this content. So before we proceed po sa question ni Sir Nelson Benyabon later, I'll first present po the question of Mr. Melvin Porzuelo. So his question is, what could be the impact of improved road networks in the islands? as of early 80s, there are areas in Guimaras, for example, that could not be reached by land. Also, could the use of motorized bangkas or pump boats affected the inter-island battle operations?
Yeah, first question, I think people prefer to travel and definitely utilize the boat to, to transport their cargoes rather than by land network. So that perhaps explain why the road networks in Guimaras in the early, say, 60s or 70s and 80s were not that developed because people find it more convenient to utilize batel and other kinds of water vessels to transport their cargoes, particularly from Iloilo and Negros. As to yeah, the second question, use of motorized bancas or pambos, I think yes, to some extent, but the bancas have limited capacity to carry, whereas Batel can carry about 17 tons or even more of, of stones and limes and other cargoes. So people still patronize or subscribe to that. But yeah, I agree that, you know, for passengers, and because palm boats can carry them in a short period of time compared to, say, Batel, because Batel is too slow for them. It will take hours for them to travel, maybe 3 hours from Guimaras to Iloilo, whereas by palm boats, it will take only 15 to 30 minutes, if I'm correct. So the shorter period of time, the better for passengers. But for cargos, I think they have no other choice but to utilize Batel in transporting their materials.
I think we have an Sir Nelson. You can ask your question directly. Yeah.
Nakamute po si Sir Nelson.
Ngayong hapon, Dr. Joefe.
Mayroon hapon, sir.
I grew up in Cadiz City, northern part of Negros, Oxmin. Una, clarification, when you talk of batil, hindi kasama ang mga fishing boats of similar design.
No, definitely not. They're not included. The fishing boats are not included as batil in the category of our study.
Kasi may mga naabutan pa ako ng mga design ng fishing boats of that kind. In Cadiz City, there's a long river, Italon River, na maraming ginagawang mga boats. And then there's another river po konti lang. But the bulk are there in Italon River. And in fact, there is a boat, there are two rather, travels from Cadiz to the Bantayan Islands.
Just to answer that, I think I remember now, sir, that there were actually batels. I mean, the crews told us that from time to time while traveling, because especially when it's floating, nagapautaw-utaw, no? They're arid. They usually conduct that fishing. You know? They have nets also, but I don't. In my recollection, currently, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my recollection, the narratives of the crew and operators, they usually telling us that, you know, the batil is just only for cargos and for passengers. But I haven't encountered yet of a study or of a narrative about fishing. I mean, for the fishing purposes.
Dua ka klase yung fishing boats doon eh. Yung tawag nilang basnig na parang baruto na malaking pampot, giant pampot sa tawag nila. Tapos may manchuryahan, there, trawler. Ngayon, mostly ano na yung mga steel vessels na and diesel powered. Another question is, the title is Central Visayas, but that's very little on the central Philippines, no? Central Visayas, Cebu, very scarce ang ano. But I'm more curious about places in Negros like Daan Victorias, where there is a shipment of sugar and then Pulupandan. That's a big port also. And in the cargoes that you mentioned, that were mentioned, there was never a mention of sugar, molasses man o yung sea, sea sugar.
Yeah, just to answer that, I think why Central Philippines, because we involved there were actually in the study like Bais in Negros Oriental, in Bantayan, and as far as Mindoro and Leyte. No? So I did not include it because these are very small encounters, but I see that as very important in the discussion because if I just put this in Western Visayas, the Bantayan is very important. Bantayan Island is very important in the study because of the passenger and manure. No?
Yes.
The other point here is, ano yung second point, sir? Nakalimutan ko.
The route to
The sugar.
and then Pulupandan.
Yes. The sugar, sir, I think that's the reason why from 1900 to present, it's not included in the study because the presence of lorcha. No? It was the lorcha usually is the one being referred to as the vessel carrying molasses and muscovado and other sugar products to Iloilo. So it's the boat introduced by Nicholas Loni from a Brixham trawler modeled after the British the boat. No? So most people say that the sugar products, muscovado, were actually carried by the Lorcha rather than by the Batel. But yeah, because most of the narratives we're taking usually rice. It's not sugar that but they also dock in Pulupandan and in Kawayan and in Pais also.
Victorias is a big road also.
Yes.
You did not include the eastern side of Negros, like San Carlos City going to Toledo in Cebu. It's a major point also where passengers are traveling every day, and then the transport of fish from Negros to Cebu.
Yeah, that's the second part of the study supposedly because of the primary focus intentionally is on Western Visayas. No, but we started already the study on that on San Carlos, and as far as we don't have the opportunity to get the information, but I guess as we expand the study, we hope to get, because I think it's very important. They are directly affected by this project. There's always the price of progress, but the heritage and the affluence and income of these people will be greatly affected by the possible construction of the Panay Guimaras Negros Bridge. But I'm not pessimistic. I'd like to do this as not as a challenge, but as an opportunity for them. Because if the government is good enough, particularly the local government, good enough to plan for the alternative utilities of this, maybe for tourist attraction. There are so many things to innovate from such. So instead of looking at it as a challenge or a problem, we'll make use of this as an opportunity to reinvent the condition or the situation of these Batel owners. And who knows, it might be even more beneficial for them with the connection of the three provinces using the bridge or the possible bridge.
Ako naman po, Dr. Joefe, magtatanong lang. Just to share lang po, maybe about, tagal na. About 10 years ago, I was part of the initial people who were invited to have a workshop by TESDA regarding the fiberglass boat making.
Yes.
Because of this provision nga that ayaw na nila ng wooden hull ships So right after that, I also attended seminars concerning culture issues about the wooden boats. So I'm so happy that part of your recommendation is saying and stating that you'd like to push for the maintaining these boats. Yun nga lang, because of the provisions, government policies now, baka hindi mangyari. Ang sa akin lang po doon kasi, ang concern lang naman natin here is not the technology, but as you said, it's culture. Remember, how many millions of fishermen do we have and boat makers? And that is not just business for them, it's part of the seamanship skills that we've always inherited. So shortly, summarize, basically it's culture that's going to be lost. Yun
Correct.
yung sa tingin ko.
Tama po yan, President. In fact, in our study, I think it's the Hiraldoy, long before the John B. Lacson, the OGT, the students were allowed to do their OGT in the Batel. And even if they're not studying at the very early age, that these particular students or people, the youth, will be trained already that we are being a maritime nation. We have this maritime heritage, and if there's such a kind of a drastic implementation because of safety and security, then the batil building or even the boat building tradition will definitely deprive our youth about this, and it's part of our culture, it's part of our heritage that we need to preserve. Maybe a compromise will do for those that are considered to be a frequent doing the service, particularly in passenger cargos. Then I think fiberglass will be implemented, but for some cases, I think we need to preserve still, and the local government unit, particularly the municipality officials, should make a stand that the batel is not just simply for livelihood, but it's also a proof of our maritime tradition. And
Yes.
How can we teach our students of that maritime heritage, of maritime culture, maritime tradition, if we lose actually that nature of our maritime experience? So I think it's very important still that we continue the boat building tradition. It's not only batil building tradition, but the boat building tradition, particularly in the Visayas. Because if we try to look at it, we have already a history where even galeras were actually constructed, were actually established in central Philippines because of that nature. We have good boat builders, carpenters, and so forth and so on, that we should maintain. It's not, when we do the boat building tradition, it's not just only the building, but also we are teaching our youth on how to be a good carpenters, how to be a boat builders, and at the same time.
Opo. Kasi now I'm just happy that you're saying that, because we can actually work. I mean, I'm hoping that we can actually work on this, since you are the ones who have made the studies, and with other boats also, that we can present something in the future to the government, not just statistics, but on the aspect of course, they told us before na ang daming options na pwedeng gawain for the boats, but again, it's similar thing with language. The moment you lose the language, you lose the culture, or you lose the history of a nation. So if we were not skillful boat makers before, hindi natin makukuha yung galleon trade. So I mean, if they did not discover our woods, or the Spaniards did not discover our woods and the ability or the skillfulness and the seafaring, the seamanship abilities of our people before, hindi mangyayari ang galleon trade dito sa atin, mag-uumpisa. Yeah. So if we maintain a certain skill, who knows what will happen in the future? We might also be tapped again to look into bigger things.
Yeah, so tama po yan, ma'am. In fact, I'd be sirang plaka siguro, ma'am. I'm always telling, if we have a maritime doctrine in a maritime nation, long before we should already realize that we are a maritime nation. Therefore, we should have a maritime doctrine. And the maritime doctrine is not just simply for geostrategic and political. It's a holistic approach of the Philippines as a maritime nation that would include even all aspects, including the cultural aspect of the maritime heritage of the Philippines. No, so it also reflects my certain lamentation that I think we already have an attempt, but we did not realize that there's a need for us to have some kind of a document to say that, to define who we are as a maritime nation.
Yeah, thank you po.
Yeah, I think all the maritime universities and institutions should have a role to play in this. It's not only the role of the government, but the private institutions and public and civil society organizations should promote to put in advance the idea of a maritime studies.
And just one more thing, pasensya na po sa audience, just one more thing. No, this is actually one of the reasons when we were asked before by Ched why we're offering performing arts in a maritime school. So talagang parang nagulat ako na why they would ask that question. We're a maritime country. We're a maritime country and seafaring is our heritage. The sea, that's basic, and we want to promote that. So parang sabi ko, ba't hindi makita ng Ched before? But of course, they supported us. That's why we have now the performing arts in our school. But you're right, it is the responsibility of the higher learning institutions, especially the maritime schools, to make people see this. Thank you po. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's good also that there will be collaborations also with all the higher institutions and historical cultural centers. I'm sure I don't want to commit, but I know the fact that UP Visayas is very interested on that. So maybe even the Center for West Asian Studies is willing perhaps to collaborate with your institution. Darrell, there's a raise of hand.
Mr. Melvin Purzuelo, I think you have a question po.
Salamat. Mayong hapon.
Mayong hapon.
I think the policy on the phase out of wooden hull vessels should be reviewed. No? Ang problema kasi dito sa mga steel or fiberglass hull, masyado silang mabigat. Halimbawa, pagdating ng if there is a threat ng malakas na storm surges, ang community alam na nila eh. Pwede sila through tawili or bayanihan, pwede nilang pagtulong-tulungan, kakargahin nila yung wooden hull na mga vessels, pwede nila iangat. Pero itong mga steel saka fiberglass na mga vessels, hindi kakayanin yan ng community na itago doon sa mga storm surges. Kaya problemado talaga kung wala tayong mga facilities para ma-safeguard itong mga ganitong klaseng vessels. No? Saka importante rin na ma-maintain natin itong mga batel kasi part sa nabanggit nga kanina ni Ma'am na part ito ng culture, no, ng lalo na dito sa Visayas, sa mga Visayans. Salamat.
Yeah, maybe it's also good for us to voice out. No, it's not I'm not against the fiberglass or the steel. No, it's not wrong. It's not bad after all. But I think it's not only applicable to Batel, but to all kinds of boats, even Vintas in the south, and to protect the historical importance or significance of these boats. So we can do a compromise rather than a draconian policy of implementing the steel or even fiberglass all throughout across the board. No? The government is also listening. Perhaps there's only a need for a lobbyist, maybe if not a filibuster, but a lobbyist to say that maybe a compromise will do rather than implementing it across the board. But I guess actually it's good that I'm getting a comments and reaction from various sectors of the society. So it's not just only scholars, but also the observers and perhaps the I'd like to hear also from yeah, sabi nga ni Ira, maybe it's good also to listen to the stakeholders and directly affected by the improvements or developments in southern Philippines. Darren?
I think Miss Edna ko also have a personal question. Miss Edna?
Hi, Dean. Thank you very much. I was I really I mean this presentation of yours brought me back to my younger days. No, as I told you earlier, our family owned a couple of batils at some point, and I didn't know. I was very young. The batils were named after me, actually. But it was wrecked by storm, etc. It was cruising between the islands of Pulilio, Patnanongan, Quezon, and then on to Mauban, where the logs, they were carrying logs, and they were disembarking this. But this is for wood industry. Siyempre ngayon, bawal na po yung cutting logs and cutting trees, no? But at that time, your presentation helps me appreciate there is a subculture around the batil and the mobility. It goes beyond what you are describing, Dean, and that's why I was asking earlier, is there a sequel to your study? Because I think it's quite interesting for socio-cultural studies to look also into the weave of the subculture that has been created around the batil and the mobility thing. The subculture of how people subsist on each other, kasi it's not just a livelihood. It is also about how the industry and poor people who would need to earn living would have to be seen, no? So it's not just the culture, it's also the economic, but it's also, and I'd like to bring this up because I think it's something that has not been brought up. But nowadays, under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we have to look at how the batil as a natural sailor is now dealing with the challenges of the climate crisis. I mean, it's the weather, how it overcomes some obstacles, or how it can develop some adaptation and innovation in batil and mobility because of the climate crisis and the climate action. So ang dami pong pwedeng ma-build ng mga sub-themes and sub-studies around it. That thing being, it's not just about mobility, but it is also about connectivity of people, materials, people to people, island to island, di ba? Connectivity between a way of life and the economy, island to island, country to country, how we can cross the bridge amidst distance, no? So I think ang daming dimension, and I would really encourage Dean to please pursue this, kasi it's not just for the sake of heritage, but I think it's building the knowledge, but also responding to what are the current adaptation challenges that may be built because of the sustainability challenge.
Thank you, Ma'am.
Yun lang po. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ma'am Edna. Mukhang marami kaming gagawin ni President Arlene Padiranga on this, because the subculture itself, I think I missed to point na there's an innovation in the process because of the absence of grease and rugby during the construction. They utilize even local materials especially to avoid yung mga worm inflicted holes in the hull of the boat. No? So this actually included in the book, but because of time constraint, I did not include that. But it seems that the subculture will be a very important topic because of the idea of survival and the island economy. The island economy is already a big
Yes.
chunk of the study map. So even more in terms of survival, and even the idea of vertical and horizontal industries attached to this. So it's not just simply the idea of batel owners and then carpenters, but even the um, businessmen and small scale yung mga cafeteria and so forth and so on might be included in the study. Expanded yung idea of expansion of nearby areas and the nodes and hubs. Thanks for that, Ma'am Edna, and I will include that in your experience, your father's experience, and your Edna, Batil Edna, will be included in the sequel of the study. Now, yeah, I think with your permission, Darrell, I think I saw actually the discussion of Rob here. Saying that the battleship, I already visited that in Hawaii, and I see the potential of that, in transforming it in the museum. But considering that the Batel is small, maybe the museum is bigger than the Batel. But if you visit, for instance, the Negros Museum, there's already a Batel exhibited in the center of the museum. But I'd like to see that in Guimaras and in Iloilo, because Guimaras is supposedly the hub of the Batel, and it deserved to be the supposedly the exhibit area for the Batel, at least in Guimaras and the Iloilo area.
Okay, sir. I think I also ask my personal question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bali, sir, my question po is in terms of the business model aspect or viewpoint. What do you think are the biggest advantages of Batel in terms of cost, maintenance, construction, in comparison to the modern steel fabricated boats that is being imposed by the government? I think this will be crucial po if we would like to present po or the preservation of these specific benefits or key strength of Batel. Yes, po, sir.
Maybe you have to look at it on a calendrical system. If we're talking here of maybe the pre-1990s or pre-80s, the cost will be less compared to the present, because the number itself in maintenance of the boat will be very expensive right now. So that's the reason why I think the government is planning to do the fiberglass instead of the wood. Because one thing is that wala na tayong rainforest, and of course the materials available, the lumber to sustain the operation would not be that much. So very limited. So I guess it's not about the cost and effect. I mean the cost benefit of, or the cost and expenses that should be considered right now in terms of the preservation, because I think the preservation is not about monetary. It is about the sustenance of our heritage, and it's priceless. And therefore, the operation might be more or less, if you look at it on the other aspect, maybe in terms of tourism and so forth and so on, rather than using the Batel for primary for transportation, because right now there are so many competitions, including, for instance, the Roro and roll-on, roll-off. These are bigger ships that might be less expensive. But again, the disadvantage is that if the Roro, you need to transport it using the land network. If you use the Batel, it's door-to-door. So many people, especially for the bulky the goods, I think they still prefer to, like sand and gravel, they prefer still Batel rather than sailboat or other boats.
So, sir, for my final question po, sir, Batel po is unfortunately it's not really that in popular mainstream culture than let's say the quintessential Filipino boats such as Balangay and Galleon ship and such others. So sir, what do you think can we do of course to put this into the mainstream for introducing Batel as an important piece of Philippine maritime history?
Yeah, between say the Balangay and the Galleon, of course, they have this more older and they're mostly significant from an historical perspective. But how to popularize the Batel as an heritage? Maybe one way is it's not just only publication because the publication only few will be getting it. But I think use of the um, digital publications and maybe social platform we can make use of that. So I think the Facebook maybe we are live on Facebook, and I think this is also recorded. So maybe we can include that in the digital platform for publication. Maybe it's good also that the students will be encouraged to study. The Asian Institute of Maritime Studies should encourage the students to do their papers on this. Maybe in a short paper will do so that we can inculcate to them or maybe encourage them to appreciate more of the batil. But I guess the very basic is that who should appreciate it. The more the locality, the students and the officials in the locality should first appreciate it. Should first give due importance or attention to this. And given the technological revolution, there's no other way but to use the Facebook and the social platform or Twitter and so forth and so on to just tell them, because even the younger ones, if you talk about batel, sasabihin nila, what is that? So they don't know exactly now what is a batel. Or some of us might be fortunate to ride or to have an experience in riding a batel, but for those who are younger ones, they don't even know what is a batel. So I think the shorter answer to that, aside from this publication, is to popularize it using the digital platform.
Thank you very much for that, very much, Dr. Santarita. In fact, Batel po is, I think, a very quintessential maritime boat for the Philippines. We have more variation of boats aside from Binta and Palangay and other Roto and other some sort of boat dito sa Philippines. And it just shows just how diverse and just how comprehensive our shipbuilding capacity as a nation. And unknown to many, I think that our country right now is also the fourth or fifth largest shipbuilding nation in the world. And I think our Batel is a testament to the great shipbuilding capacity and capability of the Filipino people. So before we wrap up the closing remarks and the closing event natin, may I ask po for the wrap up for our guests if you have other questions po? Meron pa po bang magko-question? I think wala na po ata. So I think this is it. So we'll so I'll close the presentation po and give the specifics about the book. So first of all, sir, thank you very much po for giving us this very comprehensive talk po regarding Batel. We have known today that the influence of Batel transcends more than the economic domain. It's important in terms of culture, history, heritage, and in terms of the migration that we Filipinos now take for granted. That before I think we just specific region, but I think Batel played a key role for the migration of Central Visayan people throughout the entire archipelago today. And we know, sir, that this book is this topic of this book of Batel is very personal to you, considering that this is an expansion of your personal business. So we in INSPO, also with Marlene, also with all of the guests here today, we would like to really thank you for trusting INSPO and for doing this very special project of documenting Batel, which I think is very few people have undertaken. And thank you for immortalizing this specific and important piece of our history. So we will do our best po in aims to really include it in our curatorial exhibition and include it in our project po as we really cultivate po a maritime history and heritage for our country. And right now, as in conjunction to that, IMSPO is really very focused and is committed in forming a Philippine maritime history narrative. So I think we Filipinos tend to claim that we are a maritime nation, yet we do not have substantial literatures justifying this specific claim. And this project of Dr. Santarita, I think, really help us piece by piece to really cultivate and build this grand historical block or historical timeline regarding the maritime history of the Philippines. And for this instance, it gives us the key link regarding the migration and the mobility and the cultural domain in Central Visayas, which we can connect definitely in other historical subjects relating to maritime history and heritage. So we are really looking forward for part 2 of this project. So right now, sir, I'll present for you our certificate of appreciation. So this certificate of appreciation on behalf of Dr. Erlin, this certificate is awarded to Dr. Joefe Santarita for imparting his invaluable study on the topic Batel Mobilities in Central Philippines during the book launch of Plying the Straits, Batel Mobilities in Central Philippines. Today, May 18, 2021 at Museo Maritime, Asian Institute of Maritime Studies. Given this 18th day of May 2021, Museo Maritime aims Pasay City. So this is signed po and by our President, Dr. Eileen Paderanga. Fortunately, we cannot meet personally, so we cannot give po the pictorial process of giving this certificate of appreciation. But I will send it to through Mr. Speedy po or Lalamove.
Thank you very much, President Arlene Abued Paderanga. Thank you very much, and Daryl, thank you very much, and to all the participants, attendees who attended this very important activity. Thank you very much for your presence.
So before we officially close for the presentation, I would like to present for the book. So this is it po. Medyo kita po ba? Sorry. Yes po. So yeah. So this book po, Plying the Straits, was a joint project between Dr. Santarita, Ames, and also his colleagues po, Dr. Moratilia and others. And also for all the LGUs, Ms. Edna po, who gave us the details po. You have been special mentioned po in our book. And also for the others po. This is really a great collaboration between several parties, and we are really thankful to Dr. Santarita for making this project possible. So you can now access this book po, in the official webpage or in the official Facebook page of Ames Museo Maritime. Paki-search lang po. Also, you can also email us at museomaritimo@ames.edu.ph, which is you can look at this contact information po in our official Facebook page po. So we will give you the details regarding the pricing and the access and other sort of things to grab the book. So please support this project po, because this is part of our fundraising project in order to promote maritime history and heritage in our country. So again, we would like to thank you everyone for participating us and joining us during this event.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
again, Dr. Joefe. And thank you so much. Really, we'll have more works to do. Okay.
And thank you, Karen, and to all my classmates and friends and mentors. Thank you very much.
I'd like a round of applause for Dr. Santarita.
Sige, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Ma'am Cecil, thank you.